Imagine yourself walking down Paseo de la Reforma in the early 1950s, where the air vibrates with a tangible electricity, a suspended promise that the future has finally arrived on Aztec soil. Mexico, once marked by the dust of revolutions and the slow pace of agrarian life, now awakens under the deafening roar of concrete mixers and the metallic gleam of skyscrapers that defy gravity, like the imposing Torre Latinoamericana. There is a contagious optimism in the streets, a collective sense that the nation is, for the first time in centuries, in absolute command of its economic destiny. You see men in well-tailored suits walking hurriedly with leather briefcases, crossing paths with workers whose faces are covered by the soot of progress, all gears of a machine that seems unstoppable. The Mexican peso is strong, stable, a currency that commands respect, and nationalism is no longer just a war cry, but a silent pride reflected in the windows of department stores. Mexico City's horizon expands voraciously, swallowing up neighboring old villages, while neon signs flash announcing national products with the same pomp as foreign brands. It is a time of monumental dreams, where functionalist architecture replaces colonial baroque, symbolizing an aesthetic and ideological break with the past. In this scenario, hope is the fuel that moves millions, temporarily masking the cracks forming in the foundations of this new temple of modernity. The miracle is not just an economic term. It is the atmosphere you breathe, dense, charged with ambition, and bathed in the golden light of a sun that seems to shine exclusively for Mexicans. To understand the magnitude of this period, it is necessary to observe the tectonic movement of human masses, leaving the countryside in search of the urban promise. Mexico's human geography is being rewritten not by decrees, but by the visceral need for survival and social mobility. Import substitution policies close borders to foreign products and open the floodgates for internal industrialization, creating a labor vacuum that sucks millions of peasants into the cities. You witness the birth of a new working class, huddled in neighborhoods that grow disorderly on the peripheries, where the smell of fresh tortillas mixes with the smoke from industrial chimneys. The state acts as the great architect, financing colossal dams, highways that cut through the Sierra Madre, and power grids that bring light to places once dominated by darkness. Public education expands like never before. The National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, raises its University City, a campus that is a work of modernist art, symbolizing that knowledge is the new oil. However, this accelerated urbanization creates a brutal contrast. While the capital becomes a cosmopolitan metropolis, the agricultural interior begins to stagnate, forgotten by policies that favor concrete and steel. Life becomes a race against time, ruled no longer by harvest cycles, but by the factory whistle and the schedule of crowded buses. It is an era of painful and euphoric transition, where rural Mexico, with its ancient traditions, begins to slowly dissolve into the gray homogeneity of large cities, forging a new national identity based on production, consumption, and the incessant search for developed nation status. Entering the intimacy of Mexican homes in the 1950s and 1960s, you find the true beating heart of the miracle, the rise of the middle class. In functionalist apartments of housing units like Tlatelolco, Tlatelolco, families live the dream of material stability that their grandparents could never have conceived. The living room is dominated by the black and white television, which broadcasts melodramatic soap operas and jingoistic news, becoming the new domestic altar. The kitchen shines with Hecho en Mexico appliances, status symbols that promise to free the modern woman from arduous tasks, although structural machismo remains intact. The ambient sound is an eclectic mix. The romantic bolero of Agustin Lara coexists with the rebellious rock and roll that begins to infiltrate from the north, creating a silent generational clash. On weekends, families crowd palatial cinemas to watch the golden age of Mexican cinema, seeing idols like Pedro Infante and Maria Felix on screen, reflecting an idealized and heroic version of themselves. Automobile consumption skyrockets and chaotic traffic becomes a sign of progress, not a nuisance. Children go to school in impeccable uniforms, carrying the expectation of being the first generation of doctors and engineers in the family. There is a sense of security on the streets, a predictable routine of work and leisure, where vacations in Acapulco cease to be a privilege of the elite to become a real possibility. However, beneath this surface of bourgeois contentment, there is constant pressure to maintain appearances, to belong to this bright new world, often ignoring the indigenous roots and the poverty that still persists just a few kilometers from the landscaped residential neighborhoods. Behind the glow of economic growth and social stability, a political machinery of frightening precision operates. The Institutional Revolutionary Party, the PRI. What you observe is not a vibrant democracy, but what writer Mario Vargas Llosa would later call the perfect dictatorship. The party is omnipresent, merging with the state itself, with the flag and with the national identity. The president is an almost imperial figure, a modern Tlatoani who exercises absolute power during his 6-year term, distributing favors and punishments with the same hand. Political stability, so rare in Latin America at the time, is maintained through a corporatist system where unions, peasants, and popular organizations are co-opted and controlled by the party. There is no real opposition, only a tolerated performance that legitimizes hegemonic power. Corruption is the oil that lubricates the gears of this system, tacitly accepted as the price to pay for social peace and continuous progress. Censorship is subtle but effective. The press knows what it can and cannot publish, creating a reality bubble where the government is always benevolent and infallible. Those who dare to challenge this narrative face ostracism, or in more serious cases, silent disappearance. The paternalistic system offers security in exchange for submission, and during the height of the miracle, the majority accepts this trade. The major public works, the 1968 Olympic Games and the 1970 World Cup, are showcases designed to show the world, and Mexicans themselves, that the system works. It is a power that does not need tanks on the streets all the time, for it already inhabits people's minds, convincing them that outside the PRI there is only chaos. As the 1960s progress, the polished facade of the Mexican miracle begins to show deep and irreparable cracks. Inequality, ignored during years of euphoria, becomes glaring. The wealth accumulated at the top does not trickle down to the bottom, creating a muted resentment among the popular and rural classes. But it is the youth, the children of that middle class that the regime itself helped create, who strike the hardest blow against the official narrative. Inspired by the global movements of 1968, students take to the streets demanding not bread, but democratic freedom, challenging the unquestionable authority of President Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. The tension in the air becomes unbreathable as the Olympic Games approach. The government, paranoid about the country's international image, decides that order must be maintained at any cost. The tragic climax occurs at the Plaza de las Tres Culturas in Tlatelolco on an October afternoon that would forever stain the modern history of Mexico. The sound of military gunfire against the unarmed crowd breaks the silence of impunity, transforming the modernist dream into a scene of horror and blood. The official press remains silent or lies, but the open wound in the national psyche is deep. The massacre reveals the brutal face of the authoritarianism that sustained the economic miracle, destroying the illusion that material progress could compensate for the lack of political freedom. Trust in institutions is shattered, and the sunny optimism of previous decades is replaced by a bitter cynicism and latent fear. The miracle, which seemed eternal, proves fragile, built on the silencing of dissenting voices, and Mexico wakes up from its developmentalist dream with the metallic taste of violence in its mouth. The end of the Mexican miracle was not a sudden event, but a slow agony that stretched into the economic crises of the 1970s and 1980s. The import substitution model was exhausted, foreign debt exploded, and inflation eroded the savings of those families that had risen socially. However, the legacy of these 3 decades is indelible and visible on every corner of modern Mexico City. The infrastructure built, the institutions created, and the urban culture forged during this period still sustain the country. Mexico ceased to be a rural nation to become a complex cultural and industrial power, full of vibrant contradictions. The memory of the miracle persists as a bittersweet nostalgia, the remembrance of a time when the future seemed guaranteed, contrasting with the uncertainty of the present. Today, looking back, we see that the cost of that growth was paid with freedom and blood, a hard lesson about the dangers of prioritizing the economy over democracy. The history of the Mexican miracle is a mirror for many developing nations, reflecting the glories and miseries of forced modernization. Understanding this period is essential to comprehending not only present-day Mexico, but also the power dynamics that shape Latin America. If you wish to uncover more secrets about the rises and falls that defined our modern world, don't let the story stop here. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and join us on this continuous journey through time, where the past never dies, it only waits to be rediscovered by attentive eyes like yours.